Let's call this City Council session to order. Madam Clerk, do you have the roll?
Councilman Ziprig. Councilman Ziprig.
Present.
Councilman Peterson. Councilman Fescue.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Rigsby.
Here.
Mayor Brower is absent. There is a quorum.
Thank you. We have a presentation from the Fire Department regarding the Metrolink disaster of recent history.
The suggestion had just come through my office that we memorialize the incident, the Metrolink incident. So the suggestion had been simply to open council. So there's a brief presentation, and which that's the end of, that we thought we had opened council with. So beyond that, why don't we just take a moment here to memorialize the events of September 12th.
Councilman Peterson will now offer the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Father of us all, we've again been reminded in these pictures of what has happened recently, that disaster can strike suddenly, without warning. We realize that that's the world that we live in. We stand tonight in memory of those who lost their lives. We pray for their families, their loved ones. We also thank you for the society in which we live, where we have planned for these bad things, where we have people who stand ready to help at a moment's notice, who will get up in the middle of the night when the siren rings and help us. For that, we thank you tonight. Give us wisdom as we deliberate. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any items to be added or deleted?
None, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
This is the time when we allow for oral reports from the public. Comments on non-agenda items, limited to 3 minutes. For each speaker, is there anyone who'd like to speak on an item? Seeing none, we will dispense with the conflicts of interest as they arise. We have item number 1, report from Manny Aranda.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council, and staff. My name is Manny Aranda, and I'm Director of the San Bernardino Valley Water Conservation District, and also a member of ACWA, the Association of California Water Agencies, the largest associations of water in the United States. I've been asked here to speak to you on a subject that few of our constituents know, and that is the crisis we have in water in California today. California water crisis, a crisis we cannot ignore, but unfortunately it has been ignored, or better put, we have failed to inform the public of this crisis. In June of this year, Governor Schwarzenegger proclaimed a drought in the entire state of California. If I may read from his press release, and this is what he said: following 2 straight years of below average rainfall, very low snow melt runoff, and the largest court order water transfer restriction in state history, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger today proclaimed a statewide drought and issued an executive order which takes immediate action to address a dire situation where numerous California communities are being forced to mandate water conservation or rationing. The lack of water has created other problems, such as extreme fire danger due to dry conditions, economic harm to urban and rural communities, loss of crops, and the potential to degrade water quality in the state of California. Now, after that announcement, we've seen these headlines. Anxiety rises as water levels fall. Metropolitan Water District may cut water to area cities. Water issues put big inland project on hold. The county of Riverside had planned to open up a 500-unit residential area, but it was turned down. Why? Because the water agency, Eastern Municipal, could not guarantee that they'll have water for those residents in the next 20 years. And similar situations are occurring throughout the United California. And this here, the smelt ruling, we call it the Delta smelt. I'll speak to you on that. But that's a court ruling that cuts down water that comes to Southern California. Now, if I may move on, city hopes to turn wastewater into irrigation source. That's Riverside. That's your next door neighbor. Wastewater, that's what they call from toilet to right to your faucet. And it's been used throughout several parts of California and Southern California. And they're thinking about that, wastewater. If we may move forward, water battles fought via ads. Note here, farm interests clash on need for a new canal. Well, we have enough canals throughout the state of California, but if you gentlemen recall, there was a canal called the Peripheral Canal. And that canal, is the whole object of that canal was to avoid taking water from the Delta, because the Delta presents a big problem to us in Southern California. Now, drought conditions around the city. Let's see what other cities are doing. City of Folsom imposes mandatory restrictions. Mandatory restrictions in Folsom. You know, that's Northern California. That's about Lake Tahoe up there. City of Stockton to consider change to rate structure to encourage conservation. There are many cities here in Southern California that are imposing restrictions on the use of water. Santa Clara Valley Water District recommends Health Transportation Authority reduce water usage. And this is what we're talking about, water usage. Every morning for the past several years, I jog, now I'm walking, but I jog to the Loma, and you can see it. Running down the gutter is water. This is perfectly good water, which is our wasted, and the city has to put a stop to that, because sooner or later you're going to have to inform your constituents that the rates are going to go up, or there's going to have to be mandatory conservation or rationing of water. Well, take a look. This is a lot of water. 97% of the surface of the earth is water. But unfortunately, it's what? Salt water. 2% is located up here in the North Pole and the South Pole, but that's ice caps. So that leaves how much? 1% of water to be used by us. Unfortunately, that water is not evenly distributed throughout the world. And this is an illustration. We've all seen this. This is the map of California. We see it back in grammar school. 2/3 of the water in California is in Northern California. 1/3 of the water is in Southern California. This is the Bay Delta. These are the Sierra Nevadas. Snow melt there. Pacific Ocean. He said, Manny, you can have a lot of water in the Pacific Ocean. Well, go ahead and get a cup of water, see what it tastes like. We're trying to work on what's called desal. Desal, take the salt out of the water, but it's a very expensive process, and we're not there yet. All right, the California water system. Remember, we're asking how come and how has it affected us in Southern California? Well, let's look. The Trinity River, the Sacramento River, and the San Joaquin River. This is in Northern California. Arbitrarily, there is a Southern California is a line that runs from Ventura up to Nevada. Note what we got here. This is desert. We have two rivers that we know of, the Los Angeles River, but that you don't even see that here, and we have the Santa Ana River. And likewise, we don't see it here. San Bernardino is about it right here. San Diego's over here. This is the Salton Sea, the biggest lake in the state of California. Well, let's continue with the water system. William Mulholland, his problem was to get water to Southern California. He wanted to get it to the Los Angeles area. If you saw the movie Chinatown, you know what that's about. Notice it's Los Angeles and San Diego. Well, let's keep up track of the dates. 1913, the Los Angeles Aqueduct was built, bringing water from the Owens Lake to Southern California, to Los Angeles. All right, 1913. 1913, again, the Hetchy system. Note what they were doing here. They were taking water from the Sierras, the snow melt, and moving it across the Delta into the Bay Area here, because this is where the water is at. All the water is snow melt. All right? You had that transportation of water there. And this is what the Hetchy looks like, the reservoir. 1913, 1929. This is another one we call the Cross Canal water system. They're taking water here from the, I call it the Moki Aqueduct, and bring it right across again to the South Bay area. Now you have, notice here, this is the Los Angeles Aqueduct, but note down here, the Colorado River. Well, now we're dipping into the Colorado River in 1941 to bring it to San Diego. But we still have nothing in San Bernardino. All right, let's move on. 1940, Contra Costa. they started building their, the water systems are all up here. Nothing down here. This is the Colorado River, and this is the American Canal right there. But still have nothing of significance in 1940. If we move forward, 1973, finally, we built the Oroville Dam here, the California Aqueduct, that finally brings water to San Bernardino. And Loma Linda takes its water from Metropolitan takes it from here. You've seen these aqueducts. If you go up the 5, you see them coming down there. That's your water. It's being transported. Why? Because we don't have water of our own. And if we move on, now, the California River system. There's a whole lot of water in California. Please note, these rivers are in the Sierra snowmelt, and they run down, and unless captured, unless put into reservoirs, unless banked, they're going to run right into the ocean. Southern California, we have the Santa Ana River. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but or the Los Angeles River. You know, that's a river that's always dry except when it rains. Well, anyway, let's move on. This is what the California Aqueduct looks like. Up from Northern California, comes down. This is where your water comes from. And you have to transport the water over the Tehachapi's. Interesting enough, 33% of all energy consumed in California is used to move water from Northern California to Southern California. It's an expensive process. Now, the Delta. Have you heard of the Delta? Let me point this out to you. The Pacific Ocean is here. Sacramento River is here. Stockton here. And the Pacific Ocean, San Francisco's here, it flows into the Sacramento River, and there's where you get fresh water meeting salt water, right in here. Now, take note. Now, this water has to move downward, okay? But look what you got here. These are little pieces of land surrounded by water. And we learned in grammar school that a piece of land surrounded by water is an island. And indeed, these are islands. About 68 of them, and basically farmland. In this area, we have anywhere between 700 to 1,400 square miles, depending how far you want to go on it. 750,000 acres of farmland. What do we grow there? Well, they grow apricots and sugar beets. They're growing now rice because the price of rice has gone up. But that's your farmland. Now, the problem with that is several. Let me move very quickly here. The Delta Cross Channel merely refers to a channel that avoids going through there and goes right to the particular city. That's all that is. But let me go forward a bit. Pumps. You've got to move the water from Northern California to Southern California, and you have these massive pumps. Let me go back here. Oops. Yeah. I want to go back and show you this. Let's see here. Nothing worse. I got it there. Oops. I'll get to that. All right. These massive pumps. Note this. This is about 3 stories high and about a football and a half long. That's where your water goes. That's where your energy is used. And you have these pumps. Sole reason to move them down to Southern California. No other reason. But it creates problems. I keep skipping, and I want to go back. There, thank you. All right, there's your problem. Remember I showed you those islands? These are levees. And they're made of what they call peat, soft dirt. And this one collapsed in 1992. I want you to notice something very important here. This is the seawater, or this is the water, and this is the farmland. This is about 6 feet to 8 feet here, from here to the top. And this is the same 6 or 8 feet. What has happened? The levee broke and the water flooded this area. These islands, the farmland is about 20 or 25 feet below sea level. So when a levee breaks and they have broken, it'll flood the area, and entire billions of dollars are lost in agriculture products. But we also have this problem, the delta smelt. I showed you the delta. The delta and the split tail minnow. They're little fish about no bigger than your index finger. They're very poor swimmers, but they're an endangered species. It means you've got to protect them. And where they live in the delta is called a critical habitat. You've got to take care of it. But unfortunately, these pumps I showed you, they suck all those fish. Little bitty, they only last about a year. They serve no good purpose. And they're killed in the pumps. So what happened? We had a federal judge says, hey, you got to protect those fish. And you've got to cut down on your water that you send through those pumps. They cut them down about 33%. What does that mean to you? Well, let me bring it down home so you understand. You get your water from San Bernardino Valley.
Manny, can you talk in the mic just so people on the TV can hear you? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Wherever voice is coming from, I thank you. And what is happening is that these little fish are protected, but they swim in the air where the pumps are at. Result, we're killing them. And the federal judge says, you can't do that. These are the endangered species. So you must turn off those pumps during the time that those fishes are there. And we turn them off. The result of that, water no longer comes to Southern California for those reasons. Now, let me go back to the point I was making. The city of Loma Linda gets two types of water. The well water, what we call groundwater, and they get imported water, which is the water that comes from the aqueduct, from Northern California. Your provider of the imported water is San Bernardino Valley Water District. They're allotted 125,000 acre feet per year. But because of the cutbacks, they're only getting 33,000 acre feet. So there would be a great demand, little supplies, and the prices of water are going to go up. Many cities are charging more for their water. I don't know if you're charging water, but you're going to have a problem because there's going to come a day when you're going to raise the water prices. You're going to tell your citizens you're going to have to conserve water or we're going to ration it. And then they're going to tell you, why didn't you tell us before this? And there's your problem. And I'll bring this to a close of saying the city of Loma Linda and others have to do something about it. The first thing you must do is inform your constituents that you have a water problem, that there's a crisis. Tell them why. Show them why. In every forum you can get, you got to tell them that. And then you got to start putting strategic plans for conservation, for rationing. And you might even consider, if you don't have it already, there is in many cities 2 meters. 1 meter is to meter the water that's used outside the house, and meters that are used inside the house. And incidentally, 70% of our water is used outside of the house. So you have the problem. Loma Linda has a big job to do. Inform your public. I'll end it here, and I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Is any comment from Councilman?
Manny, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in. I had asked you to come in primarily because sitting on the San Bernardino Valley board for, it's not the main board, but one of the boards that advises the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. Many of these things came to my attention. And not to go over many of the things that you talked about, but I attended a conference this last week in Ontario, and basically one of the reasons we have less water, and you kind of alluded to some of that, was we've got a second year of consecutive drought, which has made the conditions even worse. This is coming off an 8-year drought situation. We've got the driest March through May in history, and of course the court-ordered cutbacks with Sacramento Water. One thing that I think the public needs to also be aware of the fact is that even though we in the city, we do have access to quite a bit of water, we I think need to play a vital role in being an example to other cities in how we can conserve water, and there's many ways to do so. It would be great for us to put some ideas into practice sooner rather than later before we have to end up doing some drastic measures. And there's many ideas that are coming down the pipeline. And before those ideas come to us, pretty soon Sacramento is going to actually legislate some laws that's going to force us to do some of the things that they're talking about. And we're talking about rationing, where if you use a certain amount of water, if you go past the point, your water rate is going to go up. And that may not be up to us to decide. It's going to be up to the people up in Sacramento. Having said that, one of the things that I've been fighting for in the last few years has been making sure that we as a city develop in a manner in which we can address all of our citizens' needs, be it traffic, crime, and everything else. But one particular item which was addressed in Measure V was Principle 5, and I want to read from it. And it says, water quality and availability are critical to the current and future residents of the city of Loma Linda, its planning area, and its sphere of influence. No new development shall be approved that endangers the quality or quantity of water delivered to the household within the city. Basically what that says is no development projects shall be approved which would cause the quality of water delivered to Loma Linda households to fail to meet state or federal water quality standards, or which would cause an increase in residential rates, or which would result in a restriction of water usage, except for those projects exempt under state and federal law. So it is in our best interest to come up with ways that we can conserve our water and try to capture most of the water that we end up wasting it once it goes downstream and we treat our waste. So anyway, there's lots of work for us to do, and I think that we need to continue to inform the residents about this situation before it gets worse. And one other note, the conference that I attended in Ontario was put together by the Metropolitan Water District, which covers all of Southern California. And they put a plan into place to deal with these situations. And their plan had the worst case scenario. Well, what happened to us this year is worse than the worst case scenario. So they're revising their plan, and they're going to be telling all the other water districts, including the San Bernardino Valley Water District, how they're going to have to do things a little differently. So there's some changes that are going to be being made here in the next couple of years, and we need to make sure we're proactive about making sure that we're ahead rather than behind. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me show you one thing to bring home this point. This is our canal in the San Bernardino Valley Water Conservation District. You see all the water there? Here's the canal. You see the water there? Unfortunately, these pictures were taken in 2002. This is what it looks like now. It dry as a bone. There you have it. The water rushed down there, that's our version, and it goes down to the canals. Over here is Redlands, and this is what it looks like today. And this is where the well water comes from. We're in a crisis, and Councilman Popescu brought it home throughout the state of California, and we have to do something. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Any other comments? Okay.
I guess the only comment that I would make is that, and as you pointed out, that there's no shortage of water. There's a shortage of cheap water.
That may be true.
Okay, if there are no comments from the audience, then we'll move to item number 2. We have a Public Works presentation on the sewer system management plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. The history, the background, in 2006, the State Water Resource Control Board enacted the statewide general waste discharge requirement for the sanitary sewer system. And the city of Loma Linda is own and operate the wastewater collection system and fall under this jurisdiction. The state asked us to prepare a sewer system management plan, of which have 11 elements, and which include the goal, organization, legal authority, operation and maintenance program, design and performance, provision, overflow emergency response plan, fat, oil, grease control program, system evaluation and capacity assurance plan, monitoring plan, measurement and program modification, sewer management plan, program audit, and communication program. And all this program are due by August of 2009, of which the first 2 elements, which is the one that I brought to you tonight, is the goal and the organization are due this month. So I'm forward the first 2 elements to the City Council for review and approval.
Now, this item is a public hearing. Do we start with a presentation of the elements, or do we just open it for councilman discussion, or how should we handle this?
I think you can open for public comment.
Okay. Since it's a public hearing, we'll open it for public comment. Is there anyone who seeks to be recognized? Okay, seeing no one, then we'll close public hearing and move to council discussion or comment. Mr. Zick.
Looks like a worthwhile project to approve. I don't know if we need to spend more time on it. I mean, it looks very appropriate.
Yes, it's pretty straightforward. We have to maintain the sewer system, and
Do we have a choice?
no.
I don't think so.
Is that a
But
motion?
you always have a choice.
Is that-
It's one of those things that.
Is that a backwardly worded motion?
Yes, I'd make a motion to approve.
I second.
But
Is
I
there-
didn't want to cut off debate. I
Yeah.
mean,
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
aye.
Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Okay, are there any items anyone would like to pull off the consent calendar?
Move the calendar.
Second.
Any discussion? Is there any objection to the consent calendar? Hearing none, it's approved. Are there any reports of councilmen? Hearing none, looks like we're going to have a short meeting. Any reports of officers? Okay, we have a report from the fire department regarding a loss prevention program.
Yeah, this is a wildland urban interface loss prevention effort that started to put together earlier in the year due to some of the drought conditions, fire behavior that was seen in Northern California, and some of the predicted activity for Southern California when the Santa Anas hit. We felt it was important to go ahead and start informing the residents of some measures they can implement around their property and homes to make themselves more defensible, and on how to work with us in the wildland urban interface. Some of our captains have headed up this effort. Captain Gray, who's distributing the materials to you now that we've distributed, led an effort starting this last Sunday where they began to go door to door And I've asked him to come tonight, share with you the experience, and kind of announce to the community, the viewing audience, when our next effort will be, when they'll plan on seeing our personnel at their door, and announce a town hall meeting. We can go into more detail on all this. But Captain Gray, why don't you go ahead and present your program.
Good evening, Mr. Pro Tem and council members and city staff. Thank you. First of all, thank you for allowing me to come to speak to you tonight. As the chief has said, I'm going to kind of highlight our brochures that I've just handed out to you. Let me just back up a little bit and give you a little bit of background. It's that time of year again. Yesterday, I believe, was the first day of fall for the calendar. It didn't feel like it today. It was pretty hot out there, but we're looking right around the corner at fall. When October and the fall gets here, our next big fear are the Santa Ana winds. They're just around the corner. When those two elements combine in Southern California, we get their yearly wildland fires that we're all very fearful about. And there's some information in those packets there that I've given you that illustrates some of the major fires we've had in California, particularly Southern California, at this time of year when we get this, the combination of the all summer long, very intense temperatures, the drying out of the vegetation, couple that with some heavy winds that we're going to get in the form of Santa Anas, and as I said, we get the fires that come in. For us in the fire world, we get very nervous. For the folks that live in the wildland areas, they get very nervous, and for city officials, obviously we get all very nervous about what the potential may be out there. So with that, we had a fire, as you know, about a month and a half ago off of Crestview. I'm sorry. We kept it. We were very fortunate to be able to keep that fire to about, from what I remember, about 4.5 to 5 acres. Coming from somebody that I've been in a lot of fires out in this area, from San Timoteo, Retchie Canyon, all through these South Hills here, that was an amazing stop. It really was. We didn't have the Santa Anas behind them, but we had some wind behind it that afternoon. So from the point of view of a fireman, it was an amazing stop. When the winds start coming, it's much more difficult. But out of that fire grew this idea, and I want to commend a very talented young fire captain that you guys have here that has come through your ranks, Captain Jeff Gillette. At the end, we were both on that fire. When we got done with that fire, he approached the chief with an idea he had about being able to touch the community and go back and put a program together that we would be able to go house to house, talk to folks, make a brochure, which I'll go over here just briefly here in a minute, present them with ideas about how they can have a critical look at their own property, and as if you will, as firefighters, and look to see what they have around their homes, what they can modify, what kind of vegetation they may have or overgrowth that they may have that's dead or dying that they can take care of and make their homes far more defensible, far more fire friendly. That should we have, and it's not if, but it's when these fires come through here, it'll give us as firefighters a better anchor on their home and being able to defend their home. And we refer to that as defensible space. And you'll see that in this brochure. Basically what happened then is this kind of grew on its own, and basically every person in the fire department has got on board with this, and I'll explain how we've gone about distributing this brochure to the neighborhood. But I'm proud of the fact that all members of the fire department have got on board with this and have been very helpful with it. We've got a positive feed. We started, actually, as the chief said, we started last Sunday. I'll get this clicker here and I'll be able to show you where we went. The red line here, we decided that the best action was going to be the folks that were directly, for this year anyway, the folks that were directly up against the wildland, the South Hills wildland. So we started over here at Mountain View. Get my clicker to work. And we went from the east to the west, and this red line represents how far we got this last Sunday. And all these homes in here, south of Huron, we touched base with all these folks, gave them this information, talked with many of them, and we got a very positive feedback from them. They were just glad to see that firefighters were out, coming to them, talking to them, seeing how that we were concerned, and we were giving them some ideas of how they could make their homes, as I said, more defensible should a fire come through there. Next Sunday, we're going to take from here and complete the city, all the way out to Oakwood. We've also gone back, last Sunday we came out and did the Pilgrim Road area. There's about 15 homes out to the east that's under our sphere of fire control. And then this next Sunday we'll also pick up a few homes. I think there's a fair handful of homes that are out in Scotch Lane area. With that, after that, we've also asked, and I'll just, before I get to the brochure, the chief also had a personal letter to all the folks that we delivered to them, asking them if they would like to come back, come back to the firehouse on Sunday, the October 5th at 4 p.m. For a town hall style meeting, just a really informal meeting where we can further talk about the things that they can do to further make their homes defensible and fire safe, as well as, like all of us, from little kids all the way up to adults, everybody likes to come and see their firehouse and their equipment and meet the firemen. We very much like to meet them. And as I said, we've had a positive result from that. The nice thing about a plan like this and a program that we've got like this is it's a two-pronged win-win situation, both for the homeowners, where, like I said, we've gone out and we've clued them in on some things that they can make their home safer, but also for us as firefighters, from the captain level all the way down to the firemen. What's nice about being able to go door to door is subtle things. We go up somebody's driveway and we can see what kind of fire loads are in the hills, what kind of fire loads and unique situations a particular house might have that we may very well have to come back this summer and help to protect. And little things like that stick in our heads, and it's helpful for us as firefighters to have done that. So it's a win-win situation for everybody involved. The brochure itself, and I'll show you some pictures here real quick. The brochure itself touches briefly just on where we live in California, the kind of wildfires that we get in the fall that are fueled by Santa Ana winds. They specifically talk about Santa Ana winds and how difficult some of these fires can become, how unbelievably dangerous and destructive. There's some statistics here that you can read that are just amazing how bad some of these fires can be. Then there's we have a section in here on the homeowner's role and what they can do, some of the things that they can do to make their homes more defensible. If they're doing any home improvements, some of the products that they can buy and use around their home that are fire resistive. And then the defensible space we're talking about there, basically that we look at that as what we call ladder fuels. We try to inform the people that own the homes in those areas to keep their fire loads to a minimum so that the fire can't start out low, go to a medium amount of bushes, and then ultimately get into some tree structures, say, that are up against the home, and then we run the risk of the fire getting into the home, and then we've got a losing battle there. So we've had that we've handed out, the letter from the chief. And the the day we started last Sunday, there was a very timely article in the Riverside Press Enterprise that we made a copy of and also handed that out. That kind of falls along the same lines as what our pamphlet does, that how fire-wise we need to be this time of year when the Santa Anas and the fire season begins for us in Southern California. So with that kind of describes what we've done as a whole department. And as I said, everybody has been very positive as far as the feedback from the community and from the firefighters aspect, to be able to get a good view of the homes that are out there and what we can look forward, or hopefully not look forward to, but if we do have a fire, what we have to look for that's out there. Let me just run through a few slides with you. Let me emphasize first of all that virtually all of these homes in here, except for a few, and I'm going to show you some pictures, but everybody that lives up against these hills, it's not, like I say, come October, everybody starts thinking about the fire season. And I'm very impressed about how most of these homes in here, they have got a defensible space around their homes. They're very judicious about the plants they've got planted. So, like I said, I was very impressed on how they are ready. There's a few that I'll show you pictures on here that what we've been looking at, and we've informed the people that live in some of these homes that these are things that they'd want to take care of before any fire comes along. This is one of the pictures on the front of that brochure, and although that's not our community, it's going to be very eerily similar to the next picture. This is a wind-blown Santa Ana fire, Southern California wildfire, and you can see how intense and basically quite uncontrollable when the wind is behind it. This next picture, that's our Crestview fire that we had, like I say, a month and a half ago, 2 months almost now. Very similar, same type of situation. Fortunately, we didn't have the intense wind behind that, and we were very, very fortunate, as I said, to be able to, with our own crews and some mutual aid help, get and control that at just over 4 acres. This picture here is a road up to a home here in the South Hills, and I just took this briefly just to show you that as a homeowner, and what we pointed out to them is this. Look at this pointer. This road, the access to their home. We've got wildland vegetation, very tindle-dry vegetation coming down on this side, and in fact on the other side of these bushes up here. For us as firefighters, this is what's known as a mid-slope road. If a fire got down in here and came barreling up, if anybody was in there, number one, their access out is done. We can't get back out. And number two, that this homeowner, as I said, most people have clued in and really cleared that defensible space around them. We pointed this out, that for us, if we had to get in there, it would be a very difficult decision because you're putting lives at risk in here, and that this area, ideally, if they can get this area cleaned off and this area down here cleaned off, it gives us something to defend his house from. This is also, I have to commend the homeowner, this same homeowner. This is below his property, and he is obviously, I met with both the husband and wife, and they've done an amazing job of clearing all of this area here. But they, unfortunately, at this point, and they realize it, but they've got huge wood piles down in front here, so we pointed that out to them. This is another home. This is actually out in the Pilgrim area. This is right in front of these cars is this gentleman's home, and the picture maybe doesn't do it the correct justice that I wanted it to, but the wildland vegetation is right down, virtually right down to his front door. Another picture of the same house where over here you can see we've got an issue with a large propane tank. Just over this hill, again, the vegetation is heavy and thick right up to the top of that bluff, and this propane tank is covered by this almost dead bush that's here. So these are issues that we point out to the homeowners that for us, if we can get that cleared out, it gives us an anchor to have a defensible, again, the word defensible space around his home. Again, another section in a similar area there where I don't know what's in this, but I'm sure some valuable storage for the homeowner. But again, the vegetation is all the way down around the structures. Again, here just an example of here's a home, and the wildland vegetation. Once it gets going down below, an uphill slope, it gets very intense, quite hot, and that house is in danger. Here, this is actually on Crestview. These are some palm trees that are on one side of the road. Again, we stopped at these folks and gave them the same brochure. The difficult part with thick vegetation like this, and particularly these palm trees, I don't know how many of you folks have seen a palm tree fire, but they are literally like Roman candles. The embers and the sparks that fly off of these things are intense. And under wind conditions, they can travel great distances and give us some serious problems. Again, the same picture from a different angle on these palm frond, dead palm fronds that are all the way down to the ground, and the house is right below it, right here. And then lastly, this is another example of the same thing. The palm fronds, obviously, and then the home that's right below it. Our fears there is under a Santa Ana wind condition. The embers can be forcibly blown into the attic through attic vents and things like that. All houses have. And my last picture here, this is opposite on the other side of Crestview. All of this row right here of palm trees looked exactly like the other ones during the fire. The resident of this home here realized after that fire, I'm sure, and realized that we're coming into fire season. And they've made these trees so they are very, very safe. That entire property there is very, very defensible for the fire department, and he's taking care of his problems. So that's the kind of things we pointed out to residents. They've been very, very receptive to it. I've been glad that we've been able to come out and point some of these things out. We hope that they come to our town hall meeting on the 5th. I hope that you guys can come if you'd like. Again, it's nice to come to your firehouse and meet. It's your firehouse. Come and meet the firemen. Any questions you might have, we're all there willing to give you any kind of answers we can. Any questions?
Yeah, just one on the map you had at the beginning. Did the line, the red line and the I think the yellow line, are those kind of a boundary of what you consider to the south of those the area in danger, or do you consider the area be a little less than that or a little more than that? Or
those houses, what we did trying to determine the best bang for our buck, if you will, we had to come up with these are nice brochures. And we looked at the South Hills. That's our biggest danger of vegetation fire. And Huron, all the houses south of Huron that butt up, those are basically all the houses south of Huron that butt up next to the South Hills. They're our most immediate, if you will, threat of a wildfire coming through there. There are homes still on the other side of Allen, I believe it's Allen Way, on the neighborhood just north of there. There's homes in there with shake shingle roofs. And they're a big concern, particularly, like I said, those palm trees. When you get a wind behind those and you get those embers that are flying through the air, they can go for blocks. So ideally, this is a program that we're going to try to do every year, that we're going to, when the fall season gets here, and we can hopefully expand that further. Hopefully the word will get out by neighbor talking to neighbor. And everybody becomes a little bit more fire wise about what they can do around their homes. It's difficult to go to somebody. I understand. I went to a home, and a gentleman said, "Well, when I win the lottery, I'll put a new roof on my house." I understand that's expensive. But it's something that people want to keep in the back of their minds, that when they can change that, and that's probably one of the biggest things they can do on a home to make it fire safe. But for now, the answer to your question, we chose all the homes that were directly, basically in danger from the South Hills immediately.
I understand that a line approximating the line that you've shown, Huron and Lawton, is also the line that divides a heavy fire risk for insurance purposes. And I don't know exactly what the line is, but I know my property, which is just south of that green line, is considered to be high risk. It's in some kind of a brush fire zone.
They use an overlay. The insurance companies use like an overlay, and if you're in that zone, you get that letter that says you're uninsurable sometimes.
Yeah, and is there any way through programs such as this and clearing safe zones around defensible zones, is there any way to have that property reclassified as no longer in a brush zone because it's been mitigated by citizens and the fire department, similar to what we did to mitigate the flood risk in the valley portions of the town?
State of California has been doing a mapping project for all of the areas of the state that are identified as high fire risk. And you have two primary areas. You have state responsibility area and local responsibility area. Within the local responsibility area, there is what's called the very high fire hazard severity zones. And those hazard maps have been produced. Each jurisdiction will have to adopt the hazard map. We have been in some discussion with the state about the hazard map. The hazard map, basically once it's adopted, cannot be changed. What you are referring to or thinking of is a risk map. A risk is where you take the hazard and you reduce the risk by mitigations. One of our major concerns, and I've expressed this at various levels, is the insurance companies getting a hold of the hazard maps and redlining communities. This has been a very distinct and a great concern, because back in the 1980s they did that very thing with what was called the Bates maps, and that followed some of the significant fires, and especially came to light then after the Oakland Berkeley Hills fire in 1991, the tunnel fire. What we are dealing with now, though, is a much more sophisticated process, and it uses aerial photogrammetry, it uses field observations, and it uses modeling. So there is a much more sophisticated process that's there now. Local jurisdictions cannot just arbitrarily put properties in or out, and that's why it's a statewide process rather than a local process, because the concern is that local communities will just say, we don't want to be part of the process. And that is very problematic, especially when you're getting into the building regulations as well as the mitigation process. And so this has been an ongoing dynamic discussion that I've been personally involved with for probably the last 3 years. And so what you have is something that is kind of happening right now. And so there have been portions of our community that the map has been finalized. There's another portion that's a little further east of you that it has yet to be completely firmed up. But the problem is, one, that you have to recognize the hazard, and then you come up with the mitigations to reduce the risk. So that's kind of a long, drawn-out answer to your question. Is your property in it? Yes. Can you reduce the risk? Yes.
Can you increase the insurability by reducing the risk?
Absolutely. Absolutely. However, that's a question that has to be answered by the insurance industry. And this is where organizations like the San Bernardino County Fire Chiefs Association and myself in particular have expressed major concern to the California State Fire Marshal, as well as the insurance industry, saying these maps are for identifying hazards. They're not for redlining properties.
Yes, Mr. Zipping.
Since, in my memory, going back to the early 1960s, I can remember quite a few fires, both in this side of the valley and on the north side. And it seems like generally the fires that have come down from the San Bernardino Mountains into San Bernardino have been driven by the Santa Anas. The fires that start here seem to be driven south into the South Hills. And
Yes.
Is that because the Santa Anas are generally blowing from north to south?
Yes.
If that's so, does that get taken into account in these maps? And I've never seen a Santa Ana blow from south to north that I can remember.
It cannot happen that way. You can get other types of winds, but it will not be a Santa Ana. Because
yes.
physically it cannot occur that way, because Santa Anas are based upon a pressure gradient difference that gets out into the Great Basin.
It seems like, therefore, inherently, we have a little bit of an advantage
Yes.
as a city being on
And
the
this
south
is
side
a
of the
point
valley.
that I have argued with the CAL FIRE folks as far as our specific risk. And there is some disagreement as to the hazard maps because based upon our fire history, I do not believe that some of the lines that they have on their map are justified because of the prevailing winds. We do not get the winds going the opposite direction so much. Occasionally, it can run east and west, but your Santa Ana winds run from north to south or northeast to southwest, northwest to southeast, that type of a thing. And so you get a different type of a wind influence. You can get marine winds that come in, but they are not the Santa Ana winds because that's based upon a pressure gradient differential over the Great Basin.
Recognizing, you pointed out earlier, there are two parts of Loma Linda.
Yes.
Which are, frankly, on the southwest and southeast sides of the city. So there are a couple exceptions that we have
Yes.
to be aware of. But with those exceptions, it seems like we are fortunate overall.
Yes, but I have to remind you of a couple of years ago, there was a very significant fire in the south end of Redlands that was caused by a squirrel on a power line. And so even though there may not have been the wind-driven forces, there still was significant threat to the properties that were there, and this is where you can do great things to reduce the threat to your individual property, regardless of what the winds are or are not doing.
So they found a particular squirrel that caused the fire?
Yes. Yes, found his remains.
Okay.
I think an example of that would be
fricassee.
the Crestview fire. It wasn't a wind-driven fire. It had a mechanical cause, and on immediate arrival, the initial assessment was we had 15 to 20 homes in immediate threat. So it all depends on where that fire starts, and if the wind's going to blow it away from homes. If it starts in the homes, you're in trouble right off the bat.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for that report. Are there any other items?
could just make mention, I think I see Pastor McGann back here, is that right? This gentleman was my pastor when I was in grade school in Wisconsin. Thanks for coming to the meeting. Glad to see you out.
Welcome to Loma.
That was a long time ago. I turned 65 this year, so.
You wanted to see her doctor in action.
So you're here to see Dr. Rigsby, not Mr. Peterson. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, if there are no other comments, then we will stand adjourned from the City Council. And then we'll open the redevelopment agency. We'll dispense with a roll call. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
None, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any oral reports from the audience on items not on the agenda? Seeing none. We have a scheduled item, a public hearing, CRA Bill R-2008-14, approving documents related to the Loma Linda Redevelopment Agency multifamily housing revenue bonds for the Poplar Street Apartment Project, Series 2008A. Is there a report from Special Counsel? Mr. Hupsch.
Thank you and good evening. The item before you is a resolution authorizing the issuance of multifamily housing bonds, etc., and I wanted to comment a little about the nature of these bonds. The agency is the issuer, but they are a conduit issue. They're not really akin to tax allocation bonds by the agency, where the agency is obligated to make payments to bondholders from its own funds. Here, the agency, in effect, issues on behalf of a development, and the credit risk is borne by the developer and the developer's bank. These particular bonds would be privately placed with the lender, which is Citibank, which will buy and hold the bonds, and functionally it's the same as the bank making a construction loan that rolls into a permanent loan. But it's structured as a bond issue, and the reason is that enables the borrower to borrow at a tax-favored rate, which lowers the cost of the project. The documentation that is that is in front of you includes an indenture, which is, as typical, kind of a hub document that organizes the relationship among the parties, a loan agreement, which is between the borrower and the agency, a regulatory agreement which requires, consistent with federal tax law, a certain number of units be maintained affordable to very low-income households. And I should add that there are actually going to be two regulatory agreements. This one, which is required under federal tax law, and if you'll recall, under the Disposition and Development Agreement, which the agency has earlier approved, there's a separate set of CC&Rs that imposes, in many respects, greater requirements. And we're going to have both of those instruments. There's a subordination agreement under which the loan the agency makes under the DDA will stand behind lower in priority than the bonds. I hasten to add to that the affordability covenants under the DDA will be first in line. So even in the event of foreclosure, the property will only be capable of being developed for affordable units. And finally, there's a purchase contract. This is a bond purchase contract between the agency as issuer and Citibank as the bondholder. There are going to be restrictions on the bank's ability to resell the bonds. Because these are privately placed and held by the bank, there's no official statement. If they were to want to sell them, they can only pass them along to an affiliate. Otherwise, if they want to resell, they will have to come back to the agency, and the agency then would go about preparing an offering circular for the market, namely an official statement. So these are the documents that are before you. I apologize for the late submittal of the subordination agreement and purchase contract. Other parties to the transaction were charged with the preparation of those. The issuance of these bonds, I will add, is also something that was contemplated under the Disposition and Development Agreement. There will be issuer fees paid to the agency initially and annually. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. The agency and city's financial advisor, Alan Miller, is also here and available to respond to questions. I don't know if he has any comments to make. He does.
Oh.
Do you have comments to make?
Good evening. I'm Alan Miller, the financial advisor to the city and the redevelopment agency on bond financings. I just want to say that looking through all the documents, it's everything it protects. As Mark said, there's a letter of credit to cover in any event that there was not enough revenues for debt service on these bonds, so it would never come back to haunt the city general fund. One thing under the federal tax laws, to issue these types of bonds, the developer, or actually the issuer indirectly, has to get an allocation from the state of California. And then there's a certain time period when the bonds have to be closed, which in this case ends October 6th. But there's, in the regulatory agreement, there's a appendix, I think is D, that shows all of the requirements as part of that allocation process, and it's everything from making sure it meets the federal standards for low and moderate income and rental limits, and also it lists all the various features and services that need to be provided as part of this development. It's 43 units plus a manager unit. Everything from child care over so many years to fans that meet Energy Star requirements and all that sort of thing. So I think it's a typical multifamily housing deal, but it meets all the regulations and everything, and there's protection for the city as the issuer. So, and again, as we've talked about before, you have to have a tax-exempt issuer to issue the tax-exempt bond, and in this case, since it's in the city of Loma Linda, you're the issuer. But I think everything's fine, and I don't have anything negative to say about it as far as approval. So I just want you to know that you are protected. So.
Go ahead.
I just have a couple of questions. Who is the developer? I see here it's Popular Street LP Limited Partnership, but who's the person who created that? Is that listed someplace else?
I'm going to defer to the
Okay.
lawyer on this one.
The developer, as is often the case, is a single-purpose entity in connection with some of the funding sources. That's effectively required to isolate it from other contractual relationships. The laboring or, if you will, as developer is an entity called Corporation for Better Housing. And Corporation for Better Housing is an experienced housing developer of affordable covenanted projects in various cities in Southern and Central California. So they are the laboring or, but they form this entity for the purpose of this one project.
What is the cost of the project in its totality?
I'm going from memory on that now. I'm thinking, I'm going to say it's plus or minus 20 million. There's the sources and uses are comprised of the multifamily housing bond proceeds, the proceeds of tax credit, MHP money from the state of California, which is a fairly soft loan program, and those are the primary funding sources. And there is a significant amount of capital coming through on the tax credits, by the way. And
It's my understanding that we are going to subsidize about $4.5 million of that project?
Approximately.
Okay, so this is a bond that they're taking out, and we're kind of the middleman, but we're not actually the ones taking the bond. That's a separate bond that we will be taking out that we will have to pay back.
Correct. I mean,
Okay.
There are two separate pieces, and I think you framed it correctly. There's the multifamily housing bond for which the developer is liable. Separately, the agency has entered into an agreement under which it has agreed to underwrite not these bonds, but a hard dollar subsidy into the project to fill a gap. And the gap occurs because the the construction costs of an apartment project are essentially the same, whether it's for low income or market rate rents. But unfortunately, the lower the rents, the less of a mortgage it will support. And that creates a need for the agency to provide what amounts to filling a gap.
And last question, I noticed that it says the trust agreement restricts a total of 20% to be very low income. Is it possible in the future to actually build a project that's all low income rather than just 20% of it?
That's a very complicated question, actually. There is a provision of the California Constitution that restricts the ability of communities to require more than 49% of the units from being restricted to persons of low income, 80% or below. If you had 49% of the units to low income and 51% to persons between 80 and 120% of median, you could do that. Unfortunately, California laws, in terms of how they allocate funds available to assist housing, discourage you from doing that. So yes, it's possible, but there are complications with regard to funding. We are cognizant of trying to maximize, and I will tell you that this regulatory agreement in restricting 20% mimics exactly the requirement of federal tax law. The redevelopment agreement restricts 21 units, which is 49%.
Question. On the money that the city is committing to the project of $4.5 million, what was it?
Approximately,
whatever
yes.
the number is, just so the public understands, I believe that's tax increment money, which cannot be spent on anything else anyway. I mean, it has to be spent on...
It is tax increment, and within tax increment, which is an agency, not a city dollar at all, it is money from the agency's low and moderate income housing fund. Monies from the Loma Housing Fund may only be used to increase, expand, and improve the community supply of housing available to persons of limited income at affordable housing cost.
Yeah, right. Just so the public understands that, well, what are you doing spending $4.5 million on low and moderate income housing when money could be spent maybe doing something else? That can only be spent for that purpose.
Yes, it's a very restricted funding source.
Yes. Right.
And this will reduce our deficit, correct?
Correct.
For people who are watching, the word deficit is a low, moderate housing deficit, right?
Correct. The state of California allocates responsibility for the development of affordable housing to communities, and the redevelopment agency has, in the eyes of the state, a deficit of very low-income housing, and low-income housing in particular. Because of the difficulties of developing those units, especially those available at affordable rent to very low-income households, you never see them occur in the marketplace. They only occur where local agencies are active and contribute to those projects, and that's what was done by the agency board through the disposition and development agreement.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, is there a motion?
Second.
Oh, we need a public hearing. Sorry about
With-
that.
Hold that second
Yes.
until the public hearing.
Okay, we'll open this for a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make a comment? No one's jumping up. Okay, we'll close the public hearing and move to the motion.
And second.
Okay. Any other comments? This isn't one of those first readings or any of those complicated ones, right? Okay, we'll just make a... Okay, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It passes unanimously. Now for your delectation are the minutes of September 9. Is there support?
Second.
Discussion? Any opposition? Okay, they're passed. Any reports? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Mr. Mayor, we need clarification on the adjournment for the city council. We were going to adjourn to October 2, but we need to set a time.
Okay.
Who's
Mayor-
participating in that?
Mayor Brower,
You
Councilman
three.
Peterson, and Councilman Ziprick
Okay.
are participants.
What works for you? Mayor Brower is probably going to be the most restricted on
He
his
is
time.
fairly flexible that day.
He is, okay.
I'm fine with any time that the others can do it. The earlier the better. I prefer it as early as possible.
5 o'clock, okay?
5 a.m.?
No, PM.
You're talking about 5 p.m. or 5 a.m.? You're talking about the morning, right? You're talking morning.
Oh, you want to do it in the morning? Fine with me.
Is
Right.
Mayor Brower that flexible?
Yes.
Okay. Then you guys set
I'm
a
here at
time.
6:30.
I don't need to
I'm
show
here
up.
at 6:30.
But you have to come out, right? Or who's coming out for it?
I plan to come out for that. That, any time is fine.
Do you literally mean that? We get up really early in this city.
The mouth is speaking, and it says yes.
So,
Do we have to determine a time tonight, or can we
I have to adjourn to that time
To that
and
time.
date.
better decide?
You're the one that has to come the first. Is 8:30 okay? Is 8:30 too early?
8:30 is fine with me.
okay.
But
Okay.
it's simply if you're adjourning to a particular time, you need to identify the time. 8:30 a.m. is fine with me.
Okay.
Okay. So let's make it
Suggest
official.
8:30.
8:30 a.m.,
AM.
October 2. Okay.
He's going to check.
One last chance. And we don't need to come, right?
As long as I'm in class by 10 o'clock.
Okay, then it's official.
Okay.
All you out there in TV land, come on down. 8:30, October 2. Okay, if you want to come live.
Thank you.
Okay.